You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we go farther afield, go beyond our traditional stomping grounds of your Apple and your Tesla and your VIX and your SPY options. See what's going on in the ETH and the Bitcoin realm. We're going to look at the volume, the volatility, the OI, the skew, all that good stuff, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting, at least we tend to think so, Options Insider Radio Network. Don't let me tell you. Don't let me be your guide, your judge. The numbers are rolling in. July, the hottest month in the 15-plus year history of the network. August looking on trend to deliver that as well. So once again, all of you out there, if you're liking what you hear on the on-demand side, clearly you are. Keep rating and reviewing. It really does help all the new folks continue to discover the world of all things crypto derivatives, and indeed the entirety of the network, nearly a dozen programs coming at you, usually a couple of shows a day. If you want even more in your lives, you want exclusive content, like, of course, our great Pro Q&A is another one coming up tomorrow. Options Oddities, the end of the week, live access to this and everything else we do on the network. Exclusive Pro podcast feed, a whole bunch of fun stuff. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more about that. And let's see what we have going on today. Who's joining us in the hot seat today? Let's find out. It's time to roll out the Crypto Hot Seat.
Forget about cold storage. It's time to turn up the heat on thought leaders from the world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time to take their place on the Crypto Hot Seat.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Crypto Hot Seat, the portion of the program where we welcome on guests from throughout the world of crypto derivatives and proceed to pick their brains for the benefit of you, the listener. And next up on the old Crypto Hot Seat is a newcomer to the program and indeed to the network. He is Tristan Frizza, the founder of Zeta Markets. Tristan, welcome to the Crypto Rundown program.
Thanks a lot for the introduction, Mark. Pleasure to be here.
Tristan, as we are wont to do with all of our first-timers here on the network, why don't you go ahead and give our audience a bit of an overview of your background in the financial and indeed crypto space, as well as what it is you folks do at Zeta Markets.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been building out Zeta for about a year and a half now. We were one of the kind of earlier platforms building on the Solana blockchain. And so our main mandate is really to build out scalable and robust infrastructure for crypto derivatives, especially focusing on DeFi and permissionless derivatives. So we currently offer futures and options trading, and we're kind of like building an order book based exchange as well as kind of OTC settlement rails for that. And so now actually quite competitive in terms of some of the centralized competitors with Deribit and Delta and OKX. So it's great to see DeFi actually becoming like a prominent use case for derivatives these days.
And what about you? What lured you to the dark side of crypto derivatives here, Tristan?
That's a great question. So I would say I'm potentially less interesting from that side. My background was more in traditional technology. So I kind of studied a bunch of distributed systems and kind of learned in university how to build my own proof of work blockchain. So blockchain's always really fascinated me from like the decentralization aspect, how it kind of works under the hood and the kind of potential for building these kind of systems in a kind of blockchain distributed manner. However, it was really, I think, meeting a bunch of my co-founders who came from more of a high frequency background that was like the nexus of the great technology that's being on as well as the kind of finance side of things. So a lot of my co-founders came from the kind of usual big HFT market makers. One of them was like a professional options trader. And so, yeah, we basically jammed for a bunch of weeks on what we should build. We kind of whipped up a white paper and ended up entering into one of these very early Solana hackathons, built out basically what was a binary options platform as an MVP, ended up winning out that hackathon out of like 13,000 entrants. And then since then have just been building out what we think is like the best kind of DeFi infrastructure for options and futures trading.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because a lot of our guests come from the world of traditional finance, maybe the world of options, and they've been lured slowly over time into the world of crypto derivatives, and they dip their toes into it, and they slowly but surely build an interest. Sounds like you were dragged right away, right out of school, right into the deep end of crypto derivatives there, Tristan. It's kind of an interesting niche area to launch your career in.
That's right. It's like that meme where you're taking like 5 different steps. So I kind of went through, like jumped, I guess, the ladder in all those different financial primitives, going to what is arguably one of like the most complex and most sophisticated end of like finance in terms of the derivative space. So it's definitely been a massive learning curve, but definitely an area of finance that we're super bullish and super excited by.
So as you mentioned, Zeta Markets, you're trying to be really the first DeFi derivatives exchange out there with futures and options. You launched earlier this year. How has that early rollout? How has that early period gone?
That's correct. That's a good question. So yeah, we launched around January or February to kind of mainnet with our DEX platform. It was kind of a slow rollout. We essentially had like very low deposit limits, trying to basically iron out and make sure that everything was safe. And so the rollout went really well. Solana did have some kind of up and down issues that everyone kind of knows about. However, it's been really stable recently, and actually our market has been able to size up quite significantly. So that's been really good. We were, for the longest time, just Solana underlying. And so we're actually clearing more than 50% of the kind of Solana options volume right now versus centralized exchanges, which we think is incredibly exciting. Our open interest only a couple of months ago was roughly like 10K contracts, and now we're doing pretty much 150K contracts and above, which is really, really cool. And just this week, actually, we're rolling Ethereum underlying, so kind of lining up to Deribit in terms of both underlyings and expiries. And so, yeah, I guess we're just trying to see where we can go with that, getting a lot more people coming in and excited about what we're kind of rolling out and trading more. I guess on top of that as well, we're looking to list perpetual futures. That's actually just being built out right now over the last month. And so we've maybe got another month worth of engine work until that goes live. So that will give us essentially the full derivatives futures, perps, options, all under the one hood.
You have interesting timing to come on the show right now, Tristan, because that's something we've been mulling over ourselves. We launched the show mostly focused around Bitcoin and Bitcoin options. We added ETH very quickly because there was a robust options ecosystem there. And we've been kind of keeping an eye on Solana for a while, whether we should really start adding them into our rundowns week after week if there was enough paper, enough volume there. But Tristan, you're hanging out day to day in the Solana options ecosystem. It sounds like you think it's ready for prime time, Tristan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just like a testament to that Deribit. That was their kind of third underlying that they rolled out just not too long ago. They've been working on that for a while. And the fact that, yeah, we've got those 3 out, I think like, and the kind of perspective that we come from, as well as that altcoin options are very, very poorly catered to at the moment. And Deribit does have like 95% market share across kind of CeFi options, and it's only been these two. We think like how Uniswap had this Cambrian explosion in terms of listing all these spot markets for the long tail of crypto assets. We think the same things. It's already happening, I guess, for perpetuals, but options, it hasn't quite happened yet. And we think we can be kind of the first mover in that space.
All right, my producers are going to hate you now, Tristan, but I guess we're officially going to have to start adding Solana into the rundown. So I just added more work for them. So if you're angry producers, you can get mad at Tristan. Never invite him back.
Yeah, well, I think GFOL is basically listing our data
yes.
as well as some of the others. So that data is out there available. So something that people can track as well.
I have noticed that. I was wondering where they were getting that from. It is from you guys. I see. Now I'm starting to put the pieces together here. Tristan behind us. So let's talk about that volume. We talk about Bitcoin options volume. We talk about ETH options volume and futures on the show every week. What kind of numbers, what kind of action are you seeing on the Solana options front, Tristan?
Yeah, great. It's definitely been picking up. I mean, it was slow to start, I guess, because no viable platforms really operated in that space. So I think Delta Exchange was the first one to kind of list them, or one of the first. More recently, I guess Deribit came out with it. We were a little bit earlier than Deribit, and then both have been sizing up. Interestingly, Deribit has actually not cannibalized with their entrance to the market. They've actually brought a bunch of new users from their kind of more institutional client base, where I guess at the moment a little bit more retail focused. OKX, I believe, also recently entered that Solana market as well, but they've been a fairly small player. The numbers we're clearing, I think, on our DEX product, more than $50 million worth of notional volume traded a month. And then on our OTC stuff, slightly more than that as well, which is quite exciting.
So in Bitcoin options, it's roughly 2-to-1, has been for a while, calls over puts. ETH options, it's ridiculous. No one wants to touch a put to save their lives. It's over 4-to-1 calls over puts out there right now. Are you seeing a similar bias in Solana? Solana, obviously a cheaper underlying than those other two. Is it pretty much 99% calls all the time? What kind of paper are you seeing out there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we had a bunch of indicators looking at the kind of bullish versus like bearish sentiment. And I would say, when we obviously launched, people wanted to trade on us because they're massive Solana bulls, and there was a lot of call buying, I would say. During this whole Luna DPEG crisis, I think the sentiment turned very negative, and people actually flipped to the kind of hedging use. Ton of put buying that we saw. So there was like massive put skew. And then I think over the last couple of weeks, Solana kind of ripped back up to like $50. So a lot of call buying there. And, now we're back to 30. So it is quite volatile. I think people are kind of switching between. It is good as well to see people actually playing out some of these delta neutral strategies, buying straddles, strangles, stuff like that, given the uncertainty in the markets, which I think is like a very unique advantage that options necessarily have over derivatives like perpetuals.
All right, yeah, you're selling me. I was waiting on pulling the trigger on adding Solana to the show, but I think we have to go. We have to get there now, Tristan. So there you go.
Excellent.
You're adding more work to our producers, so they're going to be mad at you. But you made an interesting point. You kind of mentioned you launched in January. Of course, shortly thereafter, we saw the onset of crypto winter, whatever number this is now, 3.0, 5.0, whatever. Pick your poison out there, what number we're on right now. But obviously you launched in a bit of a challenging period. You also just mentioned, the whole stablecoin meltdown. There's been a lot of challenges thrown in your way over the last 6 or so months. What's it been like trying to spin up this platform to grow volume, to attract users in the midst of for the most part, market-wide sell-off, and then B, these other disruptions like the stablecoin meltdown that are really causing people to second guess and question the entire crypto ecosystem?
That's a really great question, and it definitely was a very tumultuous period. So we kind of launched towards the tail end of the bull market, but I would say, given some of like the network throughput issues, like we didn't manage to fully size up with our market makers and have the kind of superior liquidity and spreads that we have to Deribit today. But what's nice about options is they really fare extremely well in every sort of market. So that's why we like it. I often term options as like the Swiss Army knife of derivatives. You can speculate, upwards, downwards, sideways. You can, I guess, earn profit by kind of selling options and kind of getting the premium there, which is what you're seeing in a lot of these DeFi options vaults. So they really are a versatile instrument. And so it was interesting to see in terms of our volumes, whilst I think this crisis was happening and UST was depegging, we actually saw a massive uptick in volumes on the platform. It's quite interesting to look at the chart. It's just like really hockey stick growth through that kind of couple of week period. So that was really cool to see people actually adjust. That's where options shine. When the markets are volatile, like that's something that you can take an opinion on, like purely the implied volatility there. So people love to trade that. Our platform actually, thankfully, held up really well. And I think that's a testament to us backtesting a lot of our risk systems. Like we do all this Black-Scholes on-chain stuff, and we are under collateralized. So there is some level of risk there. But I think because we modeled it out pretty well and we've kind of backtested a bunch of our strategies, that held up really well. No unfair liquidations. We didn't have to insurance fund at all, which was, I think, like really good to see. Whereas I guess some of the other DeFi kind of derivatives venues, mainly the perps guys who listed Luna, actually suffered pretty big losses with their kind of mechanisms, I think, causing some kind of depegging issues and other sorts of things. So there were some problems there, but I think as a whole, our platform fared very well. And yeah, I would say options volume is like steadily picking up. It's really cool to see right now with this ETH merge happening, that there's been a bit of a flippening in open interest as well on Deribit. So the ETH options market is very hot now, and hence why we're basically rolling out that as our new underlying right now.
Yeah, ETH has definitely been exploding. We'll get to that a little bit later, listeners, in the altcoin rundown. But you also touched on liquidity. That's obviously a huge fundamental starting point for any new derivatives trading venue. Kind of have to start with that, and then everything else builds off that. It seems like your partners who have, a lot of experience, you said in the HFT and in the options world, they understood that because you guys have jump capital there from the beginning. You also have a lot of liquidity providers there lined up from the beginning. So walk us through, what's that liquidity been like? What kind of markets are we seeing over there at Zeta Markets right now in Solana and I guess forthcoming in ETH here, Tristan?
Yeah, great question. So when we started off, I would say the single hardest problem in DeFi and especially in options is actually getting liquid markets. So in DeFi, this is very if you're doing kind of an active liquidity provision strategy like an order book, which is what we're doing. AMMs obviously became the go-to thing for DeFi because you don't have to actively quote, and it works on this kind of passive LP mechanism. However, we are not entirely sold on that in the fact that it tends to be a price lag and kind of have all these other issues and kind of opens up to MEV and all these other front-running, back-running. And so we decided to go with the order book infrastructure. That meant that we needed active liquidity provided. We basically managed to onboard Ledger Prime and Pattern Research as our primary electronic market makers. And they've been doing a fantastic job integrating with our SDK and basically being up pretty much all hours of the day, quoting pretty tight, pretty liquid markets. So shout out to them. So that's just been gradually kind of increasing. We've managed to do that without any kind of massive incentivization yet, but that is soon to come, I guess. We don't have a token live, but we recently received a $2 million grant from Serum Foundation. And so we'll be using that as kind of incentives over our platform to make, I guess, some of the returns a bit juicier for users and encourage more taker volume on the platform. So looking to kind of engineer a bit of a market maker platform to boost volumes there as well. So it's all very exciting.
Those market makers love their incentives, Tristan. They love.
That's right.
They love their incentives out there. Well, let's make sure we clarify for all of our listeners exactly what we're talking about. Obviously, you mentioned the options and the perpetuals on your platform. When it comes to options, there were a lot of different people trying different things for years. Obviously, we were talking about mostly cash settled early on. Then there was a huge push to get into the physically settled, physically delivered type. We had LedgerX doing it. We had ICE for a little bit. It seemed like that movement just kind of withered and died on the vine. People were not as excited about that as people maybe initially hoped or expected. So what are we talking about here with Zeta? We're talking about cash settled type contracts?
So correct. So we actually cater to both on our DEX platform. Our first product, that one is all cash settled essentially, and we found that was like the best UX for users. Some of our competitors, I think, did physically settled, and people found that very hard to get their head around with. And then they also had to physically kind of settle and redeem a bunch of their positions. And if people didn't do it, they basically kind of lost their profits there, which I think people got quite angry about. But it was a bit of a clunky flow, and I think having everything as like USDC margined and cash settled was actually pretty nice. And in terms of our second product, which is Zeta Flex, this is our kind of OTC rails. We actually enable this to be much more flexible. So this is basically what you can think of as almost like an escrow contract. You kind of lock up your funds and then you can kind of through a auction mechanism sell off these options, say, to market makers. So covered calls, put selling, these are very popular use cases on platforms such as like Ribbon, Katana, that we basically supply the backend for. And so on ZetaFlex, it's fully customizable. You can pick your expiry. You can also pick kind of how you settle as well. So we support both physically and kind of cash settled options. And a really nice, I guess, use case for a lot of this physically settled stuff is we're trying to work towards, I guess we call it like liquidity mining 2.0. So obviously you've seen all these pool twos and how people distribute kind of native tokens. And it tends to encourage this like heavy farming and insta dumping of tokens. However, now we're kind of pioneering this new kind of distribution mechanism, which is locking up a bunch of these native tokens, distributing them via kind of 2-week call options, and then letting people kind of redeem that physically for the underlying token.
And you mentioned the margin. You guys have gone a long way to trying to improve the margin experience in the world of crypto. One of the problems, the things that's been holding back a lot of crypto trading is that there's pretty much over margined. It's kind of gone the other way. You guys are trying to bring something akin to the portfolio margin experience to the world of crypto options. Walk us through your margin platform and what makes it different from what else is out there.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we're pretty sophisticated in that. We're still not at the kind of span margin level, which you'd probably see in traditional finance and even probably like derivate type systems. That stuff is incredibly hard to do on chain, and we're still kind of thinking around ways to maybe do that off chain and verify it on chain, but that's kind of long-term objective. So we do take kind of like a portfolio approach where we consider kind of your different positions, and we kind of try and net out some of your longs and shorts. But in terms of how it works is we do enable under collateralized trading, whereas some of our competitors have been fully collateralized, over collateralized, and that's caused like a lot of headaches for their market makers and general market participants on their platform. So for us, you can trade pretty leveraged on the buy side. On the sell side, we are a bit more punitive with the margin, given sometimes you can get this kind of unlimited risk scenario. But yeah, essentially how it works is we allow people to kind of place leverage trades. We have mark prices internal to the platform. And this works by us kind of doing a Black-Scholes options pricing calculation on chain. And I believe we were the first ones to do that, or one of the first. And so we can price basically a strip of options in one instruction, which I think is pretty impressive and required me to do a lot of surfing of calculator manuals and how to write really efficient on-chain code. But yeah, basically we price everything on chain. Can update those kind of risk parameters every couple of seconds, given that Solana block times are 400 milliseconds, and we use TIFF, which is like a per block update oracle, like very high frequency. And so we continually update, the mark prices every few seconds on our platform. That basically allows us to know basically like liquidation levels, and that's how anyone can kind of step in once someone goes below maintenance margin and kind of step in and liquidate accounts and kind of maintain the system there.
Well, Tristan, I appreciate you joining us today in the crypto hot seat. We have to keep on rolling with the show. But before we roll on, we like to leave our audience wanting more. So if there's any interesting, you mentioned ETH is coming up. Any interesting hints you want to give our audience, you want to leave them with in terms of what they can expect from you folks coming down the pike at Zeta Markets? Now is the time, Tristan. The floor is yours.
All right, so I'm definitely going to shill some of the new things that are coming out, and there are a lot of things coming out in the pipeline. So I think perpetuals is a big one. If you want to trade them, we're going to have a great program for that. Obviously, if you're a bit of an options maxi, BTC and ETH options, as well as Solana options, are all going to be live on the platform pretty much by end of this week. So I think that's incredibly exciting. We're also going to be running trading competitions and kind of distributing these zero rewards. So I think there'll be some pretty good kind of profits to be made there. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And also, I think if you have a big audience or kind of you're a prominent trader, we are running a referral program. So that's a good way to get involved, to sign up. And, if you can refer a bunch of your friends, you kind of get kickbacks from that. And if they trade super well and do well, you guys will be top of the leaderboard and hopefully pretty profitable at that point. So I think a really kind of exciting, interesting trading experience there. And yeah, we'd love people to jump in the Discord or DM us on Twitter with kind of any product feedback and how they find it. And we're always looking to build and engineer a better platform.
And Tristan, if folks want to check out that Discord or that Twitter or that website, where should they go? What should they do?
Find us on Twitter. It's at Zeta Markets, ZetaMarkets. And then you can find all our links through our link tree there to Discord and a bunch of the other websites. So
there you go. Find them at Zeta Markets, all one word, Zeta Markets on Twitter, and that will lead you down the rabbit hole of the rest of Zeta's offerings. Well, Tristan, I appreciate you joining us here today. It's because of you now we're going to have to start adding Solana into the show. So the show's going to get longer because of you, Tristan. But I think our listeners will look forward to it. And we'll look forward to seeing all these new developments coming down the road from Zeta in the coming months, Tristan.
Perfect. Thanks for having me, and sorry in advance to your producers.
Yes, they will hold it against you, not me. As we keep on rolling, it is time for the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down the actually 2 weeks that were. Usually it's the week that was, but of course we were off last week. I took a little hiatus for the Day of Days, the options Day of Days, of course, my big holiday there. So the producers were kind enough to allow me to have one day off, one show off. You got a fun best of, though, the original episode, which is always fun to go back and revisit. So coming into today's show, we've had Bitcoin flirting with that 20K. You know, the market's been in sell-off mode ever since Jackson Hole. Bitcoin, as we all know, highly correlated to what's going on in the broad equity space. So it's been looking at a lot of red on the screen for the better part of the last few sessions as well. 20,213 when we kicked off the show. That is down substantially from our last show 2 weeks ago. We were a little bit north of 24,000, 24,100. So obviously nearly 4,000 handles to the dark side, about almost 3,900. Of course, we got even lower in the interim. On just this past Sunday, we got down to, broke the 20K level again, 19,547 on the Bitcoin front before things finally turned around. On the high side, we got up to about a little bit north of 24,000, 24,416. That was back on August 17th. So we have seen a little bit of action. That meant the vol has, for the most part, held firm, held steady. On our last show, it was about 63 and a quarter. And then we got to about 65.20 or so when we kicked off the show here. So again, usually if Bitcoin hangs around, we see the vol continue to erode. So it takes a little bit of movement to keep the vol firm, or in this case, juice it up a couple of points. And that's pretty much what we saw. Just enough movement to make that happen. Of course, things get a little bit frothy whenever we dip down below those psychologically important levels like 20,000. And so now that we're back north of it again, folks seem to be a little bit more relaxed. And I say a little bit because it's just really a little bit at the end of the day. Let's go out to our friend Simon Ho. He just joined us on Vol Views a couple of weeks ago. He is, of course, the creator of Spikes, also the creator of a lot of Bitcoin metrics like BitVol and BitSkew. That's kind of your rolling 30-day approximation of Bitcoin vol, effectively a Bitcoin VIX, listeners. It was a 76 on our last show, and reflecting that kind of mostly staying steady, in this case coming off a little bit. 73 is where it is right now, so down about 3 points. So vol kind of hanging out at a similar level to where it was 2 weeks ago. In terms of skew, last show we were talking about possibly, given the fact that the market was in rally mode, maybe we would start seeing the skew switch to the positive again. It was about a negative 3/4 on our last show. It had gotten obviously markedly negative during the height of the sell-off earlier this year. As we've been rallying, it started to get a little bit more positive or close to positive. Didn't quite get there, though. Now, this show, obviously, things have been looking a little bit more red again, so we're getting back to the negative, a -4. You might be wondering, how low did it get since our last show? Well, it only got down about -5.3. We didn't see a -25 or anything, any of that panic mode that we saw the last time we broke through 20,000, which is probably indicative of the fact that we have been here before, not too long ago. So once you've seen it a few times, maybe you don't panic as easily, really, the next time. So seeing the skew, -4, still negative, but not quite as catastrophic as it was a few months back. Simon's Bit Skew kind of showing something similar out there. It was a 94.5 on our last show. Coming into this show this week, 93.3. So a similar level, not a huge evolution out there. In terms of the OI, the calls to puts, we are seeing Bitcoin just a little bit shy of that 2-to-1 level. It has been hanging out at 2-to-1, if not more, for the better part calls over puts for ages out there. A little bit less than that this week, which is kind of interesting. 131,000 calls open right now. It's up about 1,000 And the puts, we have 70,300 puts open. That's up about 3,300. So a little bit more puts kicking in than calls this week, just keeping us right under that 2-to-1 calls over puts, but still very call heavy, obviously. Wait till we get to ETH. You'll see a lot more calls out there. And I'm looking forward to adding Solana into the mix in the coming weeks. Maybe we'll see what's afoot out there. I know I'm talking to Tristan. It sounds like more and more people are intrigued by that space. And there's enough, at least underlying movement out there and some vol to drive interest. So for traders, that's all they really want. They want a little bit of volume, a little bit of volatility. They'll make the rest up themselves. So interesting stuff out there. Let's see what's going on from an overall expiration perspective. Where are you folks lining up from your Bitcoin options perspective from an expiration cycle? And it's all September right now, which is interesting. Getting back into the front month, 73,300 contracts, up 6,000. September is, of course, a quarterly, so it has been putting on some OI for quite some time. Now that it is the front month, it is moving into the lead. Not exactly surprising. December, number 2, 56,000, up 3,600 contracts from this time 2 weeks ago. And then March, a new addition to our top 3. So we're already getting into next year, listeners, with 20,000 exactly. In terms of the size positions, which strikes are dominating the OI right now? Where are the top 5 size positions? Let's check it out for ourselves. Number 5 is the 30,000 strike with 9,500 contracts open. That's down about 700. By the way, we just had August recently rolling off the board, which is why a lot of these are down. Front month took a lot of paper with it. Number 4, we have the 45,000 strike, 9,700 contracts open. That's down 300. Number 3, the 40,000 strike, 10,400 contracts open. It's up about 700. Number 2, the 20,000 strike, 10,500 contracts open. We're kind of neck and neck for a lot of these strikes here, listeners. That's up about 1,400. And the number 1 size position in Bitcoin options right now, at least over there on Deribit, is the 25,000 strike. It has 11,600 contracts open. That's actually down 3,200 from this time, our last show. So interesting evolution out there. August rolls off the board, takes a lot of paper with it, but the 25K strike managing to hold on to the number 1 spot. And speaking of action out there, what's been going on since our last show? The most active day was back on August 26th. You know, whenever Bitcoin starts flirting with that 20K level, that's where we start to see decent spikes in terms of volume. And we saw that back on the 26th. Nearly 40,000 contracts going up that day, 38,600. That's the most active day we've seen in quite some time out there. You have to go all the way back to the big sell-off back in June 13th to see a more active day with about 54,000 contracts that day. So August 26th, no slouch, 38, almost 39,000 contracts on the tape. Let's see if the CME products are delivering out there as well. Let's get out to the CME Bitcoin complex. You know what? We were talking earlier about maybe it seems like a few funds have awakened to the big Bitcoin options on CME. That remains the case this week. We saw the OI ticking up about 1,100 contracts to about 4,500, which is a lot for this contract. And we saw almost 550 trading just last Friday. That's an enormous amount of paper for Bitcoin options. For a long time, it was doing 22 contracts a week. So that is, to use the technical term, a ton of paper out there. So definitely some folks are awakening to the big 5X Bitcoin options right now. Let's see if the futures are keeping pace as well. They had a more active day on Friday as well. 16,000 going up. Obviously, we've seen easily 30,000 plus contract days back in the early days of this product. So not quite there right now, but still a decent lift from what we've been seeing out there, 8, 9, 10,000 contracts for a while. The OI also ticking up about 3,100 contracts to 15,500 contracts. So a little bit more life on the big Bitcoin futures. But for you folks, I know you want the micro. Let's get on out to the micro products and see what's going on out there. First, let's go on out to the micro Bitcoin futures. We saw the OI ticking up out there, about 7,000 contracts to 27,000. So more folks piling in out there, and about 15,000 going up on Friday. So a pretty active day out there. In terms of what's been going up in the micro Bitcoin options, you know, for all the paper we're seeing in the big Bitcoin options, you might expect to see something similar in the micro. I mean, the micro is where all the action should be. I know for a lot of our audience, that's where a lot of you are interested. That's the size you need to really trade these products effectively. And they, for whatever reason, have not been lighting the world on fire. A couple of weeks ago, we saw a whopping about 700 contracts going up in the micro Bitcoin options. Last week, we did see a little bit more paper going up, 2,300 contracts going up. So again, a pretty active week out there. And then this week, we're seeing about 524 going up on just today, pretty much. So starting to kick in, I guess, again. But by the way, if you want to see these numbers for yourselves, listeners out there, we have our show, This Week in Futures Options. I've mentioned before that if you're interested in this program, you should be checking out TWIFO every Thursday because we do delve into crypto. We also have a specific report. If you're interested in what's going on in the CME crypto products, they do have a This Week in Futures Options report just for that. Go to cmegroup.com/TWIFO, TWIFO, of course, the name of the show, and you can choose your asset class from there. Scroll on down to cryptocurrency. It's the second one from the top there, and you'll see all the different products, the big Bitcoin, the big ETH, and then the micro Bitcoin and ETH. So again, it's starting to kick up. I mean, we did see 22 contracts a week for a while there, if not even that much. So that's an uptick, but it has more to go. Speaking of upticks, let's see what's going on in the exploding world of the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Let's explore the altcoin universe. If Tristan and some of our other guests have their way, we might be adding Solana to this in the not so distant future. So let us know if you want to see that, listeners. We do the underlying rundowns now, but there is a growing ecosystem, as we just witnessed, of options activity out there. So you might have to start breaking those down as well. Let's get to the top 10 digital assets from a market cap perspective. Excuse me out here for looking at the list. But once again, the Doge holding down the number 10 spot, listeners, fending off all comers. Dogecoin hanging out 8.3 billion with the market cap for the old doggy coin at number 10. Number 9, the aforementioned Solana, 11 billion, pretty much exactly. Number 8, Cardano, 15 billion. Number 7, XRP, 16.2 billion. Some interesting stuff coming out recently about potential pump and dumps and other things going on out there in XRP. Intriguing, worth a look, as everyone's still kind of waiting for what the hell is going to happen with this name. It's been hanging out around the 6, 7, 8 spot for a while. We're still waiting to see, is it a security, is it not? Is the SEC going to take action, are they not? We don't know, but intriguing stuff out there, for at least for your reading in between now and the next show. Number 6, good old Binance USD, 19.2 billion. Then we jump up again to number 5, BNB, 45.5 billion. Number 4, USD Coin, 52.2 billion. Number 3, Tether, 67.5 billion. Numero Due, it's ETH, 187 billion. So back below the 200 billion level. And then our old friend Bitcoin, 386 billion. Man, we haven't seen these two this low in a little bit. You add these two together, and it's obviously well below where Bitcoin was just a few months back, but intriguing stuff nonetheless. Bitcoin number 1, 386 billion. We had a T on that not too long ago, listeners. So intriguing stuff. You don't need me to remind you of the halcyon days of crypto from just a few months ago. Perhaps we shall get there again. We shall see. Meanwhile, let's break down the action in the number 2 out there. Number 1 in a lot of your hearts. That is ETH. Coming into today's show, 1537.5. That's off quite a ways from where we were on our last show 2 weeks ago. 1897. That's down about 359 handles over the last couple of weeks. In between that, we got as low as about 14.25. That was just yesterday, Sunday, 1425. And the high was about almost 2,000, 1953. That was back on August 17th. So a lot of living out there since our last show, which is why the vol is looking a little bit frothier. Of course, we know ETH, it's always a little bit more volatile than Bitcoin anyway. And it's more prone to have a nice little pop when things happen. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now. 94.60 on the ETH vol compared to about an 88.70 where it was on our last show 2 weeks ago. So a little bit frothier, a little bit firmer than it was a few weeks ago. Skew, same deal to what we saw out there on the Bitcoin front. About negative 4.75. It was about negative 1.5 on our last show. So getting a little bit more negative. We saw it dip down to about a 6.4, negative 6.4 in the interim since our last show. Right now, hanging out, obviously, about negative 4.75. So still looking pretty negative. What's not looking, at least to the downside right now, is the open interest. It's still all calls all the time, listeners, when it comes to ETH. Coming into showtime, almost 3.5 million, 3.45 million calls open on Deribit. That's up another 150,000 from this time 2 weeks ago. The puts, 846,000, is actually down 3,000. So the puts can't gain any OI. Meanwhile, calls tacking on another $1.50 out there. So once again, all calls all the time here in ETH land. We are well beyond 4-1 now. Calls over puts. In terms of the most active day since our last show, it was the 26th as well. That was the big day here. 461,000 contracts. Not quite as much of an outlier as what we saw with the Bitcoin options. We have pretty active days in ETH for the better part of the last month. As our guest was mentioning, ETH's been pretty active, so much that it's drawn them into adding ETH options on their platform. I mean, we saw the 10th, we saw 433,000 contracts going up, the third 423,000. So we've been in the 400 plus K realm for pretty much all this entire month. So 461 is the most active, but still it's not that much beyond what we've been seeing out there, because the ETH has just been blowing up the volume charts for the better part of the last month. Let's see where you folks are hanging out from an expiration perspective. We've been saying for a couple of weeks now, you folks are really just in love with those December 3000s for whatever reason. That's where the action is. And December remains the number one size position out there in ETH options right now. 1.4 million contracts open in December, up another 70,000 from this time last week. September number 2, 1.26 million, up a whopping 260,000 since our last show. So a lot of people piling into September, which is now the front quarterly, also the front month. So getting a double whammy of interest, because ETH folks pretty much only like to trade quarterlies, as witnessed by our top three. Once again, we have March number 3, so all quarterlies again. That's about 900,000 contracts open exactly, up 41,000 again. It was up 41,000 on our last show 2 weeks ago, up 41,000 again this week. In terms of size positions by strike, where are your folks lining up right now? Let's go find out. Number 5, it is the 4,500 strike. That has 190,000 contracts open there. It's up about 25,000. Number 4, we're jumping all the way down to the 2,500 strike. So that's a huge jump. 242,000 contracts there. That's up 35,000. The number 3, we're split in the middle, going back to the 3,500 strike. That has 359,000 contracts open. That's up 26,000. Number 2, the 4,000 strike. That has 402,000 contracts open. That's up 14,000. And number 1, I said it before. You know it. You love it. The 3,000 strike. 480,000 contracts are open now on the 3,000 strike across the board. That's all the months, listeners. That's up 60,000 from this time 2 weeks ago. So once again, you folks cannot get enough of the 3,000s. I'll have to go look and see. I'm assuming, given the numbers, DECE is number 1, and it's up so much. A lot of that's probably in December again, but we shall see. In terms of action out there on the CME front, what's going on with their products from an ETH perspective? We're seeing ETH futures, the big ETH futures, about 4,100 contracts open interest. That's down a few hundred from this time 2 weeks ago. We saw 9,500 contracts going up on Friday, though. That's a pretty decent clip for, again, these are big contracts. Listen, the multipliers are huge. They're aimed at institutions, not at the retail audience. So seeing that kind of paper is decent paper out there. In terms of the products aimed at you, the micro contracts, let's get on out there. The micro ETH futures, the OI just surging as we're seeing this resurgence of interest out there in all things ETH. The micro ETH futures is, the OI is 68,000 contracts now. It's up 23,000 from this time 2 weeks ago. And we saw 27,000 futures going up last Friday as well over there at CME. So the micro ETH futures on the old rampage. You know what else is on the rampage? We were talking about this again. Check out Twifo if you're not listeners. We were talking about crypto with our guest Carly Garner on Twifo last week, and she was lamenting the fact that they have some clients trading the micro ETH options, and the liquidity, she said, still isn't there, but it is picking up. It seems to go in fits and starts. That's the problem. We see big active days, then periods of quiet. Right now, today is a pretty active day again. 3,370 contracts have already gone up in ETH, including the 1,300 puts have traded 1,770 times out there in September right now. So a lot of action going up. Again, you can check these out for yourselves for free via our cmegroup.com/Twifo reports. You can check them out whenever you want. So a lot of paper on the tape over the last couple of weeks. Last week, we saw about 24,000 contracts going up in micro ETH options. As you mentioned on the Twifo show, though, 17,000 of that was all in one day. So it was very, very staccato trading. And then the week before that, 20,400 contracts. So the numbers are there. Whether that starts adding to more liquidity, we shall see. But people are trading up the micro ETH options. Again, we'll table Solana for today, but maybe we'll come back to it from an options perspective. Maybe next week's show. We'll see. Let's get out to some of the rest of the altcoin you folks trade right now. XRP, it was, about 37.2 cents 2 weeks ago on our show, 32.8 cents this week. So obviously feeling a little bit of a dark side. Going to see a lot of that this week. Listeners, down about 4.3 cents from 2 weeks ago. Good old Dogecoin, 7.7 cents 2 weeks ago, 6.3 cents this week. Still managing to cling to its number 10 spot in the top 10s, though. Litecoin, almost 60 and a half bucks on our show last week. And it's a little bit north of 55 today, so down about 5.20 from where it was 2 weeks ago. Let's get out to Cardano, 56 cents 2 weeks ago, 44.7 cents this week, so obviously down about 11.3 cents. Polkadot, 884 2 weeks ago, 718 today, so down about $1.66. And Solana, at least from an underlying perspective, 43.87 2 weeks ago. Again, that's what Tristan was just talking about. The movement out there is certainly impressive. Might be a contract you might want to have some options on. It's moving around a lot. 43.87 2 weeks ago, 31.64 today, down 12 and a quarter pretty much from where it was 2 weeks ago. Let's throw on a little bit of Shiba as well, because 2 weeks ago it was 0.000016. This week, a whopping 0.000012. So unfortunately, yet again, no Shiba Lambos this week. All right, that is going to do it for us here on the Crypto Rundown today. I want to thank our guest, Our guest, Mr. Tristan Frizza from Zeta Markets. You can find him for yourselves. The best place at Zeta Markets, all one word, on Twitter. And then from there, you can find the links to everything else they have cooking over there. Check them out if you're interested in all things options on Solana. Got a feeling it might be a growing ecosystem coming down the road. And of course, that's going to do it for us here on the show. But if you want to stay tuned throughout the rest of the week, we have a lot of great content coming at you. Great pro Q&A coming at you tomorrow, as well as on Wednesday, Education Wednesday, Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. If a lot of this stuff I'm talking about here today flies over your head, listeners, you don't get it, check out Options Bootcamp, check out Options Playbook Radio. Two great educational sources for you here on the network. Thursday, the program I mentioned multiple times throughout the show today, TWIFO, This Week in Futures Options, as well as episode 2 of the Option Block, Friday Volatility Views, and for all you pro folks, of course, we have a great Options Oddities. And we're back again next week, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.